What we're focusing on specifically now is the so-called stones biotope. Now that is the rocky riffle type habitat typically found in a river, not all rivers, but where it's present it would be those rocks of a sort of from 2 centimeters up to about 25 centimeters in size, and classically a cobble size, brick size rock that we'd be looking at picking up, turning over and seeing what organisms are in that and on that sample. There are two elements to this. It's the stones in current and the stones out of current. So if we look down towards the river and we look at that sampling being taking place now, we'll see Jean in the river, and he's making his way across to a riffle section at the end of that rapid, and he's going to start sampling for the stones biotope in there. The key thing there is that he holds the net sufficiently far from where he's be sampling. The turning of the stones has to be very vigorous, so he'll be putting the net into the water downstream of him, and as he turns over the stones with his feet, the organism will be dislodged and will wash down into the net. He's going to avoid picking up the coarse sediments by having the net downstream, so it's really only the lighter organisms which will float down. The key element here is that he only samples for a total of 2 minutes. So in the process of setting across and working his way across the river, the fact that he's not sampling isn't included in 2 minutes. So it's only actual sample time that is recorded as a 2 minutes. However, there is a clause there, and that's really if in fact we find that the stones are largely bedrock or highly embedded, difficult to turn over, one can extend that time up to 5 minutes in total. You just need to note that time on your score sheet, indicating that you've gone over the standard 2 minutes of sampling of stones in current. What's important with all sampling and all biotopes is that we in fact range across the site. We don't want to be restricted to one simple area, a singular area, and sampling only there. So it's important to range both from the left bank to the right bank, and also up and downstream of the sample site that we're working on. The last element of the stones habitat that we'll be sampling is what we call the stones out of current. So we've finished with the stones in current, we're now moving to stones out of current if it's available at the site. Now that's characterized by stones which are generally cobble size still, 2 to 25 centimeters in size. They may be bedrock again as well, and they would be generally out of the current on the edge of the river. And what characterizes them really is the fact that they might have a fine silt sediment deposit sitting on the surface, but there's still slow moving water going over them. They're out of the main current, but they have that silt over the surface. And again, we'd work that, kicking across them, disturbing them, kicking over, turning them over with the feet, with the hands, rubbing them, dislodging anything that's attached to them, and then moving the net through there vigorously, picking up anything that is in the water column once the stones have been turned over and dislodged. The important thing with stones out of current is that we at most spend a minute sampling that particular sub-biotope of the stones. So in all, moving the stones, tumbling them over with the feet, moving with the hands over the surface, we've got a minute to complete that section. And again, ranging across the site, looking at a number of different stones out of current habitats if they're available. We've got a minute to do that. What John is doing now is part of the hand-picking and visual observation aspect. He's hand-picking, picking up stones in the different habitats here. He's got stones in the current there, and possibly looking for things that he might have missed when he was doing the sampling with the net. He's now going into out of current areas, picking up stones there. Again, possibly missing things that might have been present there, but not caught in the net. The sorts of things we might expect to find there would be things like water pennies, tend to cling onto the rocks quite closely, and don't always get dislodged in the process of sampling using the net. The other things might be the freshwater sponges, which can't get dislodged at all, that are on the SASS form and part of the protocol. But if we don't do the visual observation aspect, we just don't pick them up at all. Once we've finished our stones out of current sample, That gets combined with the stones in current sample, and that collective biotope of stones is analyzed together in one tray, and we'll look at that together in a little while. Some of the common errors that come through on the stones habitat sampling or stones biotope sampling would be that the stones are not vigorously or sufficiently vigorously turned over to allow the dislodging of the organisms which are clinging to those rocks, and often can be quite vigorously clinging. So important to turn the rocks and vigorously work them over with your boot or hand to dislodge organisms stuck onto the rocks. The other thing is sometimes there's a tendency to go over 2 minutes, and it's just an enthusiasm, but important to stick to 2 minutes in total. The other key thing to remember and not forget in the sampling of the stones habitat, particularly stones out of current, is that you want to be making sure that the water that you're sampling is connected to the main channel, and you're not sitting in a backwater which has isolated water quality from the main channel that you're particularly interested in.